what happens when the person everyone overlooks turns out to be the most dangerous person in the room? In a world where appearances deceive and first impressions can be dead wrong, sometimes the most extraordinary heroes hide in plain sight.
This is the story of a woman who endured years of mockery, discrimination, and humiliation, only to reveal a secret that would leave her tormentors speechless and transform her from victim to legend. In the halls of corporate America, where suits and ties often mask insecurity and prejudice, one quiet woman carried secrets that could make grown men tremble.
While others saw weakness, she carried the strength of someone who had faced death and emerged victorious. While they saw an easy target, she possessed skills that had been forged in the world's most elite military unit.
Sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from those who shout the loudest, but from those who have learned to speak with their actions. This is one such story, a testament to resilience, hidden strength, and the moment when the underestimated become unstoppable. Sarah Martinez walked through the gleaming lobby of Henderson Financial Group every morning at exactly 7:45 a.m., her sensible flats making barely a whisper against the polished marble floor.
At 32, she possessed an understated presence that most of her colleagues barely noticed. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing conservative business attire that seemed designed to help her blend into the background. To the fast-talking brokers and ambitious executives who dominated the 42nd floor, Sarah was practically invisible. But invisible was exactly how she preferred it. The financial planning department where Sarah worked occupied a corner of the building that most people forgot existed. While the high-energy trading floor buzzed with million-dollar deals and testosterone-fueled competition just 3 floors above, Sarah's world moved at a different pace. Here, she helped ordinary people plan for retirement, college savings, and life insurance.
It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful, and Sarah found genuine satisfaction in helping families secure their futures. What her colleagues didn't know was that Sarah's approach to her work was shaped by experiences they couldn't imagine.
Every client meeting was conducted with the same methodical preparation that had once meant the difference between life and death. Every financial plan was crafted with the precision she had once applied to mission planning in places most people couldn't pronounce. The attention to detail that made her an excellent financial planner had been honed in situations where mistakes weren't measured in lost profits but in lost lives. The trouble started small, as it usually does. Marcus Webb, a recent MBA graduate who had joined the company 6 months earlier, seemed to take particular pleasure in making Sarah's life difficult. At 26, Marcus possessed the kind of arrogant confidence that comes from never having been truly tested. His expensive suits, perfectly styled hair, and loud voice made him a natural fit for the company's aggressive sales culture. He had quickly aligned himself with the alpha males of the trading floor, and together they formed an unofficial brotherhood of workplace bullies. "Hey, Mouse," Marcus called out one Tuesday morning as Sarah passed his desk. The nickname had started as a joke about her quiet demeanor, but it had stuck, and now several people used it regularly. Sarah didn't respond, continuing toward her office with the same steady pace she maintained every day. "I'm talking to you, Mouse," Marcus said louder, causing several heads to turn. "My client wants to discuss some investment options. Think you can handle something that advanced, or should I find someone with actual experience?" Sarah stopped and turned to face him, her expression neutral. "I'd be happy to help your client, Marcus. Would you like me to set up a meeting?" Marcus grinned, enjoying the attention he was getting from his audience. "Actually, never mind. This is a serious investor, not someone looking to put $50 in a savings account. I'll handle it myself." The small group of Marcus's friends chuckled, and Sarah felt the familiar flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. But she had learned long ago that reactions only fed bullies. Instead, she simply nodded and continued to her office, closing the door behind her and taking a deep breath before starting her day. This pattern continued for weeks. Marcus seemed to find new ways to undermine Sarah's confidence and professional standing. He would interrupt her during meetings, question her recommendations in front of clients, and make subtle comments about her qualifications that left her feeling diminished and frustrated. The situation escalated during the company's quarterly review meeting. Sarah had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive presentation about the department's performance and client satisfaction ratings. Her numbers were excellent, client retention was at an all-time high, and her personal client satisfaction scores were consistently above 90%. As Sarah stood to present her findings, Marcus raised his hand. "Before we start, I just want to point out that Sarah's client base is pretty different from what the rest of us handle. I mean, we're talking about small-time investors and retirees, not the kind of high-value clients that really drive revenue for this company."
Sarah felt her jaw clench, but she maintained her composure.
Actually, Marcus, if you look at the retention rates and lifetime value calculations, you'll see that. I'm sure the numbers look good on paper, Marcus interrupted. But let's be honest about what we're really discussing here. Sarah does good work with her demographic, but it's not exactly the same league as managing portfolios for our premium clients.
The room fell silent, and Sarah could feel every eye on her. Her department head, Robert Chen, looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. Sarah realized that this was her moment. She could either stand up for herself or continue to be marginalized. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "My clients trust me with their life savings."
A retiree with $100,000 has just as much right to professional service as a millionaire with a diversified portfolio. Maybe more, because they can't afford to lose what they have. That's very noble, Marcus replied with a smirk. But at the end of the day, this is a business. We need people who can handle pressure and deliver results that matter. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah felt something shift inside her. A familiar sensation she hadn't experienced in years. It was the same feeling she'd had standing on a mountain ridge in Afghanistan, watching enemy positions through binoculars, knowing that her next decisions would determine whether her team made it home alive. But this wasn't Afghanistan. This was a conference room in downtown Chicago, and the enemy was wearing a $3,000 suit instead of tactical gear. Sarah swallowed her response and continued with her presentation, but something fundamental had changed. B7.5.
That evening, Sarah sat in her modest apartment, staring out at the city lights and thinking about the path that had brought her here.
On her bookshelf, barely visible among financial planning textbooks and industry journals, sat a small collection of items that told a different story about who she really was. A Navy SEAL Trident pin, worn and tarnished from years of service.
A photograph of her with her unit, all of them in desert camouflage, their faces young and determined. A folded American flag that had been presented to her family when they thought she wasn't coming home.
Sarah had joined the Navy at 18, driven by a combination of patriotism and a desire to prove herself in a world that had always underestimated her. The path to becoming a SEAL had been brutal. Months of training that pushed her body and mind beyond what she thought possible. She had been one of only 3 women to complete the program that year, and the first Hispanic woman in her unit's history. For 8 years, she had served in places where every day brought new dangers and challenges that would have broken most people. She had led rescue missions behind enemy lines, provided overwatch for diplomatic convoys in hostile territory, and participated in operations that would never be declassified. She had been wounded twice, decorated 4 times, and had earned the respect of some of the toughest warriors in the world. But when her father was diagnosed with cancer during her second deployment, Sarah had made the difficult decision to leave the service and return home. She had used her GI Bill benefits to earn a degree in finance, wanting a career that would allow her to help people while staying close to her family. She had deliberately chosen not to discuss her military background at work, partly because she wanted to be judged on her current merits, and partly because she had learned that civilians often didn't know how to relate to her experiences. Now, sitting in her apartment and replaying the day's humiliation, Sarah wondered if her choice to remain silent had been a mistake. She had spent years learning to blend in, to be the quiet professional who got results without drawing attention. But perhaps there were times when standing up required more than just professional competence. The next morning brought a new challenge. Sarah arrived at work to find a note on her desk from HR, requesting a meeting to discuss concerns that had been raised about your performance and team compatibility. The note was signed by Jennifer Walsh, the department's human resources representative, and scheduled for later that afternoon. Sarah spent the morning trying to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering to what the meeting might entail. She had never received any formal complaints about her performance, and her client reviews were consistently excellent. The only source of conflict she could identify was the ongoing tension with Marcus and his group. When the appointed time arrived, Sarah knocked on Jennifer Walsh's office door and was invited to sit down across from a woman she had only spoken with during her initial hiring process. "Sarah, thank you for coming," Jennifer began, consulting a file on her desk. "I want to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention regarding your interactions with your colleagues." "What kind of concerns?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice level. "Well, there have been reports that you're not really a team player. Some people feel that you're standoffish, that you don't participate in office social activities, and that you sometimes seem dismissive of input from your colleagues." Sarah felt a flash of anger but forced herself to remain calm. Can you be more specific about what I've done that's problematic?
I understand there was an incident during the quarterly review where you were somewhat confrontational with a colleague who was trying to provide constructive feedback. You mean when Marcus Webb questioned my professional competence in front of the entire department? Sarah asked. I responded professionally and defended my work. He also mentioned that you often seem to think you're better than the entry-level position you hold. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Entry-level position.
The implication was clear. Marcus had painted her as an arrogant underperformer who couldn't accept her place in the company hierarchy. I've been with this company for 3 years, Sarah said carefully. My performance reviews have been consistently positive, and my client satisfaction ratings are among the highest in the department. I'm not sure how that translates to being unsuitable for my position. Jennifer nodded, but her expression remained skeptical. I'm not questioning your technical abilities, Sarah. But there's more to being a successful employee than just doing your job. We need people who can collaborate effectively and contribute to a positive work environment. Sarah realized that this conversation was not really about her performance, it was about her failure to fit into the social dynamics that Marcus and his allies had established.
She was being penalized not for doing her job poorly, but for refusing to accept their treatment of her.
What exactly are you asking me to do? Sarah asked. I think it would be beneficial for you to make more of an effort to integrate with your colleagues. Maybe participate in some of the after-work social events. Be more receptive to feedback and try to approach disagreements with a more collaborative mindset. Translation: accept your place as a target and stop fighting back. Sarah left the meeting feeling more isolated than ever. The message was clear: conform to their expectations or face the consequences. As she returned to her desk, she noticed Marcus watching her with a satisfied expression that made her stomach turn. That weekend, Sarah found herself at a military veterans support group meeting that she had been attending sporadically for the past year. The group met in the basement of a community center on the south side of the city, and it was one of the few places where Sarah felt like she could be completely honest about her experiences. I'm dealing with something at work, she told the group during the open discussion period. There's this guy who seems to enjoy making me miserable, and now he's convinced management that I'm the problem. Tom Rodriguez, a former Army Ranger who had become something of a mentor to the younger veterans in the group, leaned forward in his chair. What kind of workplace are we talking about?
Corporate finance, Sarah replied.
Nothing like what we're used to, but the dynamics aren't that different. There's a hierarchy, there are people who abuse their position, and there are people who get targeted. What? The difference, said Maria Santos, a former Air Force pilot, is that in the military, there were usually consequences for that kind of behavior. In the civilian world, sometimes the bullies are the ones who get promoted. So what are my options? Sarah asked. I could file a formal complaint, but that would probably just make things worse. I could look for another job, but I don't want to give them the satisfaction of driving me away. Tom was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at Sarah. You know what I think your real problem is? You're trying to be someone you're not. You're a warrior trying to pretend you're a sheep, and the wolves can smell the deception. What do you mean? I mean, you spent 8 years being one of the most elite soldiers in the world, and now you're letting some desk jockey with a fancy degree make you feel small. That's not who you are, Sarah. That's who you're pretending to be. The words resonated more deeply than Sarah wanted to admit. She had spent 3 years trying to fit into a world that seemed determined to diminish her, and she was exhausted from the effort. But what's the alternative? She asked. Walk into work tomorrow and announce that I used to kill people for a living? That's not exactly going to improve my professional relationships. Nobody's saying you should lead with your service record, Maria interjected, but maybe you should stop hiding it like it's something to be ashamed of. You earned that trident, Sarah. You earned the right to hold your head high. As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about Tom's words. For 3 years, she had been operating under the assumption that her military background was irrelevant to her current life, something to be compartmentalized and forgotten. But maybe the problem wasn't that her colleagues didn't know who she really was. Maybe the problem was that she had forgotten. The following Monday brought a new indignity. Sarah arrived at work to find that her desk had been moved, relocated to a smaller workspace in a less prominent area of the office. When she asked Robert Chen about it, he explained that they were restructuring the workspace to improve collaboration.
Collaboration with whom? Sarah asked.
Well, Marcus has been promoted to senior associate, and we want to position him where he can mentor some of the newer team members. Sarah looked across the office to see Marcus settling into her former workspace.
a broad smile on his face as he arranged his belongings on the desk she had occupied for 3 years.
That evening, alone in her apartment, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to her former commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, who now worked at the Pentagon. "Sir," she wrote, "I hope this finds you well. I'm writing to ask for your advice about a situation I'm facing in my civilian career.
I've been dealing with some challenges at work that have made me question whether I've been approaching things the right way. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you if you have time."
She sent the email before she could change her mind. Colonel Patterson called her the next evening.
Hearing his voice again transported Sarah back to briefing rooms and forward operating bases, to a world where her competence had never been questioned and her contributions had been valued. "Sarah Martinez," he said with obvious pleasure.
"I was wondering when I'd hear from you. How's civilian life treating you?"
It's been
"Challenging, sir," Sarah admitted, and found herself telling him everything: the bullying, the marginalization, the sense that she was losing herself in an effort to fit in. When she finished, there was a long pause before Colonel Patterson spoke again. "Sarah, do you remember what I told you after that operation in Kandahar? The one where you held that overwatch position for 14 hours while the extraction team dealt with complications?" Sarah remembered. It had been one of the longest days of her military career, maintaining surveillance on enemy positions while her team worked to extract a captured diplomat. She had remained motionless for hours, providing critical intelligence that had ultimately saved lives. "You told me that endurance is just another weapon," she said. "That's right. And endurance isn't just about surviving difficult situations. It's about maintaining your core identity while you're going through them. You've been enduring this situation at work, but somewhere along the way you forgot who you are. So what should I do?"
Stop hiding, Sarah.
"You're not some entry-level employee who should be grateful for whatever scraps they throw you. You're a decorated Navy SEAL who has served her country with distinction. That doesn't make you better than your colleagues, but it damn sure means you don't have to tolerate being treated like you're less than them." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her living room for a long time, holding the Navy SEAL trident pin that she kept on her bookshelf. She thought about the woman who had earned this insignia: fearless, competent, uncompromising in her dedication to excellence and her loyalty to her teammates. That woman wouldn't have tolerated Marcus Webb's behavior for a single day. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah made a promise to herself. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would stop pretending to be someone she wasn't, and she would remind herself, and anyone else who needed reminding, exactly who Sarah Martinez really was. The quiet mouse was about Tuesday morning arrived, with an unusual energy crackling through the offices of Henderson Financial Group. Sarah Martinez walked through the lobby at her customary 7:45 a.m. But something was different about her bearing. Her shoulders were squared, her stride more purposeful, and there was a glint in her eyes that hadn't been there in months. She wore the same conservative business attire, carried the same leather briefcase, but the woman inside those clothes had undergone a fundamental transformation overnight. As she settled into her relocated workspace, Sarah opened her laptop and began reviewing her client portfolio with fresh eyes. Every case file represented real people with real dreams. Families trying to build security for their children, couples planning for retirement, individuals rebuilding their lives after setbacks. These weren't just numbers on spreadsheets. They were missions, and every mission deserved her absolute best effort. Marcus Webb arrived 20 minutes later, strutting toward what had been Sarah's desk with the confident swagger of someone who believed the world owed him deference. He had spent the previous evening celebrating his promotion at an upscale bar with several colleagues, regaling them with stories about how he had handled the mouse situation. This morning he was riding high on his perceived victory. "Morning, Mouse," he called out as he passed Sarah's new location. "How do you like your new accommodations?" "I think the lighting is much better over there." For the first time in months, Sarah looked up from her work and met his gaze directly. Her expression was calm, but there was something in her eyes that made Marcus pause mid-stride. "Good morning, Marcus," she replied, her voice carrying a note of quiet authority that he had never heard before. "I hope you enjoy the desk. Just remember that location doesn't determine performance. Results do."
Marcus frowned, unsure how to interpret her response. He had expected the usual meek acceptance, or perhaps sullen resignation.
This new tone was unexpected, and it made him slightly uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite identify. The first real test of Sarah's new approach came during the weekly department meeting. Robert Chen was discussing quarterly targets when Marcus interrupted to share his thoughts on optimizing client acquisition strategies for maximum revenue impact. "I think we need to focus our energy on high-value prospects," Marcus said, shooting a meaningful glance towards Sarah. "Maybe redirect some resources from the smaller accounts to pursue clients who can really move the needle for our bottom line." In the past, Sarah would have remained silent, perhaps making a few notes while internally seething. Today, she spoke up immediately.
"That's an interesting perspective, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying across the conference room with crisp clarity. "But I'd like to challenge the assumption behind it. Our data shows that client retention rates are significantly higher among what you call smaller accounts. These clients tend to refer family members and friends, creating a compound growth effect that often exceeds the short-term revenue from individual high-value accounts."
Marcus shifted in his seat, clearly irritated by the pushback. That's a very theoretical way of looking at it, but in the real world you need to prioritize where you spend your time. "I agree completely," Sarah replied smoothly.
"Which is why I'd like to share some real-world data that might inform our discussion." Without waiting for permission, Sarah opened her laptop and projected her screen to the conference room display. The presentation that appeared was comprehensive and professionally polished, clearly the work of someone who understood both data analysis and strategic planning.
"Over the past 12 months, my client base has generated an average of 2.3 referrals per active account." She began, clicking through slides that displayed compelling charts and graphs. "The lifetime value of these referred clients exceeds the initial account value by an average of 340%. When we factor in retention rates and compounding growth, the revenue impact of this demographic actually outperforms the high-value accounts by significant margins." The room had gone completely silent. Robert Chen was leaning forward in his chair, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of Sarah's analysis. Even Marcus's allies were paying attention, their earlier smirks replaced by focused concentration. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "client satisfaction surveys indicate that our smaller account holders are more likely to recommend our services to their networks. This organic growth strategy has generated over $2 million in new business this year, with minimal acquisition costs." She clicked to her final slide, which showed a comparison chart that made her point undeniable. The data was clear, comprehensive, and devastating to Marcus's argument. "Of course," she concluded, "I understand that different approaches work for different types of financial professionals. Some people excel at pursuing high-value clients, while others are more effective at building sustainable long-term growth through relationship development and community trust. The key is recognizing what each team member brings to the table and leveraging those strengths appropriately." The presentation was a masterclass in professional assertiveness. Sarah had not only defended her position but had done so with such thorough preparation and diplomatic language that any response would seem petty or uninformed by comparison. Marcus was visibly flustered. Those are interesting numbers, but you're still talking about small-time investors. The real money is in portfolio management for serious clients." "Define serious," Sarah said, her tone remaining perfectly professional, while carrying just enough edge to indicate that she was not intimidated. "I mean clients who understand sophisticated financial instruments, who are looking for aggressive growth strategies, who have the capital to make moves that actually matter in the market." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "So you're talking about clients who need complex portfolio management, risk assessment, and strategic planning that requires advanced analytical skills and the ability to perform under pressure." "Exactly," Marcus replied, apparently missing the trap he was walking into. "That's fascinating," Sarah said, "because those are exactly the skills required for successful financial planning at any level. The difference is that when you're working with families who are investing their life savings, the pressure is actually higher, not lower. A millionaire who loses 20% of his portfolio might be disappointed. A middle-class family who loses 20% of their retirement fund might not be able to afford groceries." Sarah's point was not just logically sound but emotionally compelling, and everyone in the room could feel the strength behind her words. "In my experience," she continued, "the most challenging financial planning work involves helping people with limited resources achieve their goals despite facing significant constraints. It requires creativity, precision, and the ability to deliver results when failure isn't an option." Robert Chen cleared his throat. "Sarah, this is excellent analysis. I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss how we might apply these insights to our overall department strategy." As the meeting concluded, Sarah packed up her materials with the same methodical precision she had once used to field strip weapons in the desert. She could feel eyes on her from around the room. instead of the pitying glances or dismissive looks she had grown accustomed to. There was something approaching respect.
Marcus lingered as the conference room emptied, clearly wanting to say something but unsure how to proceed.
Finally, he approached Sarah with what he probably thought was a conciliatory tone. "Hey, that was a good presentation," he said. "I didn't realize you had put together such detailed analysis on your client base." Sarah looked up from her laptop, meeting his gaze with calm confidence. "Thank you. I believe in being prepared for any discussion about my work, right, of course. Look, I hope you didn't take my comments personally. I was just trying to contribute to the strategic conversation." For a moment, Sarah considered letting him off the hook, accepting the olive branch, and returning to the uneasy peace they had maintained before. But she thought about Colonel Patterson's words about maintaining her core identity, and she realized that accepting false peace was just another form of surrender. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I want to be very clear about something.
I don't take your comments personally because I understand exactly what they are. Attempts to undermine my professional credibility and position within this company. What you need to understand is that those attempts are based on a fundamental misreading of who you're dealing with."
Marcus's expression shifted from conciliatory to defensive. "I don't know what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything," Sarah interrupted, her voice remaining calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. "I'm stating facts. You've spent months trying to marginalize me, questioning my competence, and attempting to position yourself as superior, despite having less experience and demonstrative worse results."
"That stops now. You can't talk to me like that," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly.
Sarah stood up, and for the first time, Marcus noticed that she moved with a kind of controlled grace that seemed almost predatory. There was something in her posture that made his instinctive response change from aggression to caution.
"Actually, I can talk to you exactly like that," she replied.
"Because unlike you, I've earned my position here through consistent performance and professional excellence. I don't need to tear down my colleagues to build myself up."
Marcus took a step back, suddenly uncertain. "Look, if you have a problem with how I've treated you, maybe you should talk to HR instead of threatening me." "Threatening you?" Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly.
"Marcus, if I were threatening you, you would know it. This is just a conversation between colleagues about professional standards."
There was something in the way she said those words that made Marcus profoundly uncomfortable. He couldn't quite identify what had changed about Sarah, but every instinct he possessed was telling him that he had seriously misjudged the situation.
"I think we should just agree to focus on our work and maintain professional boundaries," he said, trying to regain some sense of control over the conversation. "I think that's an excellent idea," Sarah agreed. "Professional boundaries work both ways, though. I expect the same level of respect and courtesy that I extend to others."
As Marcus hurried away from the conference room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just encountered something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. The quiet woman he had been bullying for months had revealed herself to be something entirely different, and he wasn't sure how to process the change.
Sarah, meanwhile, felt a familiar surge of satisfaction. It was the same feeling she had experienced after successfully completing a challenging mission. The knowledge that she had faced a threat, assessed the situation correctly, and responded with appropriate force.
The only difference was that this battlefield was carpeted and climate-controlled. Word of Sarah's presentation spread quickly through the office, as office gossip always does.
By the end of the week, several people had approached her with questions about her analytical methods and strategic insights. Jennifer Walsh from HR even stopped by her desk to mention that she had heard very positive feedback about Sarah's recent contributions to department meetings.
But the real test came the following Monday, when Sarah arrived at work to find a crisis in progress. One of the company's largest clients, a manufacturing firm that had been investing with Henderson Financial for over a decade, was threatening to pull their account after a series of poor investment decisions had cost them nearly $500,000. The client, Robert Morrison, was scheduled for an emergency meeting at 10 a.m., and the entire senior staff was scrambling to figure out how to salvage the relationship. Morrison's account represented over $3 million in managed assets, and losing him would be a catastrophic blow to the company's quarterly numbers. Robert Chen was pacing in his office when Sarah knocked on his door at 9:30 a.m. "Sarah, this isn't a good time," he said without looking up from the stack of files on his desk. "We're dealing with a major client crisis."
"I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here. I've been reviewing the Morrison account, and I think I might be able to help." Robert looked up, clearly skeptical. "Sarah, I appreciate the offer, but this is a sophisticated client with complex needs. We need someone with experience handling high-stakes negotiations."
Sir, with respect, I have more experience with high-stakes situations than anyone else in this office, Sarah said, her voice carrying a quiet confidence that made Robert pause.
What do you mean?
Sarah took a breath, realizing that this was the moment when she would either fully reclaim her identity or continue hiding behind a facade that was slowly destroying her spirit.
Mr.
Chen, there are some things about my background that I haven't discussed, but I think they might be relevant to this situation. Before I joined Henderson Financial, I served 8 years in the U.S.
Navy as a special operations officer. I've conducted negotiations in hostile territory, managed complex logistical operations under extreme pressure, and led teams through situations where failure meant casualties. Robert's mouth fell open slightly. You're saying you were in the military? I'm saying I was a Navy SEAL, sir. And while I understand that business negotiations are different from military operations, the fundamental skills are remarkably similar. You assess the situation, identify the other party's primary concerns, develop multiple contingency plans, and execute with confidence. Robert stared at her for a long moment, as if seeing her for the first time. Why haven't you mentioned this before? Because I wanted to be judged on my current performance, not my past experiences, Sarah replied. But I'm beginning to think that was a mistake. My military background taught me skills that are directly applicable to financial planning and client relations.
Such as?
Risk assessment, strategic planning, crisis management, and the ability to maintain composure under pressure. Most importantly, I learned that every mission succeeds or fails based on preparation and execution, not on how much noise you make during the briefing.
Robert was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. Finally, he asked, "What do you propose we do about Morrison?" Sarah had been hoping he would ask.
She opened her briefcase and pulled out a comprehensive analysis that she had prepared over the weekend.
I've reviewed Morrison's entire investment history with our firm, analyzed the specific decisions that led to his recent losses, and developed a recovery strategy that addresses both his immediate concerns and his long-term financial goals, she said, handing him the document. Robert scanned the first few pages, his eyebrows rising as he absorbed the thoroughness of her analysis.
This is incredibly detailed. How long did this take you to prepare? About 6 hours, Sarah replied. In my previous career, 6 hours was often all the time you had to plan an operation that could affect the lives of hundreds of people. This seemed like an appropriate use of that skill set.
As Robert continued reading, Sarah could see his expression changing from skeptical to impressed to genuinely excited. "Sarah, this is exactly what we need.
You've identified the core issues, developed realistic solutions, and created a presentation that demonstrates we understand his concerns. This could actually work."
This is the book. It's about history. There's one more thing, Sarah said. I'd like to be the one to present this to Morrison.
Sarah, I don't know if that's worse. Sir, this strategy will only work if Morrison believes we truly understand his situation and are committed to fixing it. I can demonstrate that understanding in a way that Marcus or the other senior staff can't, because I've actually been in situations where failure has real consequences.
What if he doesn't respond well? What if you can't convince him?
Sarah met his gaze steadily.
Then we'll be exactly where we are now, except we'll know we tried our best approach. But I don't think that's going to happen.
I've spent 3 years learning everything I could about financial planning and client relations. Combined with my operational experience, I believe I can convince Morrison that Henderson Financial is still the right choice for his company.
At 9:55 a.m., Sarah walked into the conference room where Robert Morrison was waiting. Morrison was a 60-year-old businessman with graying hair and the kind of hard expression that comes from building a successful company through decades of tough decisions.
He was clearly angry, and he wasn't interested in pleasantries. "Mr. Morrison," Sarah began. "My name is Sarah Martinez, and I want to start by acknowledging something important. We failed you. The investment decisions that led to your recent losses were based on inadequate risk assessment and insufficient attention to your company's specific needs. That's unacceptable, and I want to explain how we're going to fix it."
Morrison leaned back in his chair, clearly surprised by her directness. Most financial professionals would have started with excuses or minimized the scope of the problem.
"Go on," he said. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah walked Morrison through her analysis with the same precision and confidence she had once used to brief mission commanders.
She explained exactly where the previous strategy had gone wrong, demonstrated her understanding of his company's unique challenges, and presented a comprehensive recovery plan that addressed both immediate damage control and long-term growth objectives.
Most importantly, she spoke to him as one professional to another, without condescension or false promises. When he asked difficult questions, she answered them directly. When he challenged her assumptions, she either provided additional data or acknowledged the limitations of her projections. "Miss Martinez," Morrison said when she finished, "this is the first time anyone at this company has talked to me like they actually understand what's at stake here. Most of your colleagues seem to think financial planning is a game where other people's money is just play chips." "Morrison, I've spent my career in situations where mistakes have serious consequences," Sarah replied. "I understand that your company's financial stability affects not just you, but your employees, their families, and the communities where you operate."
"That's not a responsibility I take lightly." Morrison studied her for a moment.
"What's your background, Ms. Martinez?"
"You don't talk like a typical financial planner." Sarah had anticipated this question, and she had decided to answer it honestly. "I served 8 years in the U.S. Navy before transitioning to financial planning.
My military experience taught me the importance of thorough preparation, honest assessment, and personal accountability for results." "What did you do in the Navy?"
Special operations, sir.
"I was trained to plan and execute missions where failure wasn't an option." Morrison's entire demeanor changed.
He sat up straighter, his expression shifting from skeptical to respectful. "Special operations. That explains a lot about your approach to this situation. Sir, most people in this business are playing with house money and hoping for the best. You're talking like someone who understands that every decision has real consequences for real people."
That's exactly what I need from a financial advisor. By the time the meeting ended, Morrison had not only agreed to maintain his account with Henderson Financial, but had also committed to increasing his investment by another $1 million, contingent on Sarah becoming his primary account manager. As Sarah walked back to her desk, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction that went beyond the professional victory. For the first time in 3 years, she had been completely herself in a work environment, competent, confident, and uncompromising in her commitment to excellence.
Marcus was waiting by her desk when she arrived, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern.
"Sarah, I heard you just saved the Morrison account," he said. "This is the book. It's about history."
"That's pretty impressive. Thank you," she replied simply, beginning to pack up her materials for the day. "Look, I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot," Marcus continued. "I'd like to start over, maybe collaborate on some projects." Sarah paused in her packing and looked at him directly.
For months she had been hoping for exactly this moment: recognition, respect, an end to the hostility. But now that it was here, she realized that his approval no longer mattered to her. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I appreciate the sentiment, but I think we understand each other perfectly well. You tried to marginalize me because you thought I was weak and you could get away with it. Now you're trying to align yourself with me because you realize you were wrong. Neither approach is based on professional respect or genuine collaboration."
Marcus flushed red. "I was just trying to—" "I know exactly what you were trying to do," Sarah interrupted.
"The question is whether you understand what I'm trying to do."
"Which is what?"
Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm trying to do my job to the best of my abilities, support my clients' success, and maintain my professional standards.
What I'm not trying to do is waste time on office politics or worry about what people like you think of me."
As she walked toward the elevator, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months.
The woman who had earned a Navy SEAL trident was finally back, and she had no intention of hiding again. Behind her, Marcus stood by her desk, finally beginning to understand that he had not been dealing with a mouse at all.
He had been poking at a sleeping lion, and now the lion was wide awake to roar. The transformation of Sarah Martinez from office target to respected professional might have been the end of most workplace stories, but for Sarah, it was just the beginning of something much more significant. Word of her success with the Morrison account had spread beyond the 42nd floor, reaching the executive offices and creating ripples throughout Henderson Financial Group that no one could have anticipated.
3 weeks after the Morrison meeting, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. She was reviewing client portfolios when her phone rang with a call from the reception desk. "Miss Martinez, there's a gentleman here to see you," the receptionist said. "He says his name is Colonel Patterson, and that you'll know what this is about." Sarah's heart stopped for a moment. Colonel Patterson, here, at her office. She hadn't spoken to him since their phone conversation weeks earlier, and she couldn't imagine why he would visit her at work. "Please send him up," she said, her mind racing through possibilities.
10 minutes later, Sarah watched as Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, dressed in civilian clothes but still carrying himself with unmistakable military bearing, walked through the office toward her desk.
Several of her colleagues stopped their conversations to stare at the imposing figure making his way across the floor. "Martinez," he said with a grin as he approached her workspace. "You look good, soldier. Civilian life seems to be treating you well." "Well?" Sarah stood and shook his hand, acutely aware that every eye in the office was now focused on their interaction. "Colonel, this is unexpected. What brings you to Chicago?" "Pentagon business at Great Lakes Naval Station," he replied. "But I wanted to make a detour to see how you were doing after our conversation. I have to say, from what I've been hearing, you've been making quite an impression."
"What have you been hearing?"
Patterson pulled out his phone and showed her a message thread. "I still keep in touch with some of the procurement officers who work with defense contractors.
Apparently, Morrison Manufacturing has been telling everyone who will listen about the exceptional Navy veteran who saved his company's investment portfolio. Small world, isn't it?"
Sarah felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment.
She hadn't realized that Morrison's praise would extend beyond Henderson Financial's walls. "He's a good client," she said simply.
"He's more than that," Patterson replied. "He's a former Marine who recognizes quality when he sees it. And apparently he's been asking questions about whether Henderson Financial has any other veterans on staff who might be able to help his friends in the business community."
As they talked, Sarah became aware that her conversation was drawing an increasingly large audience.
Marcus had emerged from his office and was hovering within earshot, along with several other colleagues who were pretending to be busy while obviously listening to every word. "Colonel," Sarah said quietly, "would you like to continue this conversation somewhere more private?" Patterson glanced around the office, taking note of the audience with the experienced eye of someone who had spent decades reading rooms and assessing situations.
"Actually," he said, raising his voice slightly, "I think this is exactly where we should have this conversation. Martinez, I want you to know that the Morrison account isn't the only place your name has been mentioned lately." "Sir?" "I've been getting calls from several defense contractors who are looking for financial planning services. Apparently word is spreading through the veteran business network about a former SEAL who's providing exceptional service in the private sector. These are companies managing multi-million-dollar contracts, and they specifically want to work with someone who understands operational excellence and mission-critical thinking." The office had gone completely silent now. Even Robert Chen had emerged from his office and was listening intently to the conversation. Patterson continued, his voice carrying easily across the quiet floor. "What these clients are looking for isn't just financial expertise. They want someone who understands accountability, precision, and the kind of strategic thinking that comes from high-stakes operational experience. They want someone who's been tested under pressure and proven capable of delivering results when failure isn't an option." Sarah could feel the weight of attention from her colleagues, but for the first time in years, it felt like respect rather than scrutiny or mockery. "Martinez," Patterson said, "I want you to know that your former teammates are proud of what you've accomplished here. Transitioning from special operations to civilian success is one of the most challenging missions any of us face, and you've executed it with the same excellence you brought to every operation we ran together." He paused, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wooden box. "In fact, I have something for you that's long overdue." Sarah's breath caught as she recognized the type of presentation box used for military decorations. Patterson opened it to reveal a bronze medal with a distinctive ribbon, the Bronze Star with Valor device. "This medal was approved 6 months after you left service," Patterson explained, his voice now carrying the formal tone used for military presentations. "The paperwork got delayed in the bureaucracy, but the Pentagon finally processed the award for your actions during Operation Highland Storm. You carried a wounded team member 3 miles through hostile territory while providing cover fire and coordinating extraction. Your actions saved 2 lives and prevented the compromise of a critical intelligence gathering mission." The office was absolutely silent as Patterson lifted the medal from its case. "Sarah Martinez, by order of the Secretary of the Navy and in recognition of exceptional courage under fire, you are hereby awarded the Bronze Star Medal with Valor device for heroic achievement in connection with combat operations against hostile forces. This is the book it's about history. This is the book it's about history. This is the book it's about history." After he passed the population between military systems, the discovery of liver state train. This is the book it's about history. After years of hiding her service record, Sarah was finally being recognized for who she truly was and what she had accomplished. When the brief ceremony concluded, the office erupted in spontaneous applause. Sarah looked around at her colleagues, many of whom had barely acknowledged her existence for 3 years, and saw expressions of genuine respect and admiration. Marcus was standing near his desk, his face pale and his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. For months he had been bullying someone he perceived as weak and insignificant. Now he was confronting the reality that he had been targeting a decorated war hero whose accomplishments dwarfed anything he had ever achieved.
Robert Chen approached the group, his expression a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Sarah, I have to ask, why didn't you ever mention your military background?
This kind of experience would have been incredibly valuable information for client relations and business development. Sarah looked at her department head, the man who had relocated her desk and questioned her team compatibility just weeks earlier, and chose her words carefully.
Mr. Chen, I wanted to be judged on my performance as a financial planner, not on my military record, she said. I believe that my work should speak for itself, and that my past experiences were only relevant if they helped me serve our clients better. But Sarah, Chen continued, we have several clients who are veterans or defense contractors. Your background could have opened doors that we didn't even know existed. Patterson stepped forward, his expression hardening slightly. With respect, sir, maybe the question isn't why Martinez didn't mention her background, but why it took a Bronze Star presentation for you to recognize the quality of the person you've had working for you all along. The rebuke was delivered with military precision and diplomatic courtesy, but its impact was devastating. Chen's face flushed as he realized the implication that he had been so focused on surface appearances and office politics that he had completely missed the exceptional talent working in his own department. Colonel Patterson is right, Sarah said, her voice carrying a new note of authority that commanded attention. My value to this company isn't based on my military decorations or my service record. It's based on the fact that I deliver exceptional results for my clients through thorough preparation, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to their success. She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. Those qualities come from my military training, but they're demonstrated through my work performance. Every day, I apply the same standards of excellence and accountability that I learned in special operations to help families and businesses achieve their financial goals. Marcus, who had been listening from the periphery, finally found his voice. Sarah, I had no idea about your background. I want to apologize if I ever did anything to... Marcus, Sarah interrupted, her tone professional but final. Your behavior toward me had nothing to do with my military background and everything to do with your character. You tried to marginalize me because you thought I was an easy target, not because you didn't know I was a veteran. The directness of her response left Marcus speechless. Sarah had not only called out his behavior but had done so in a way that made clear she would not be accepting any convenient excuses or face-saving gestures.
Jennifer Walsh from HR had appeared during the ceremony and was now standing at the edge of the group, looking deeply uncomfortable as she processed the implications of the scene she was witnessing. Sarah, she said tentatively, I think we should schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss how we can better leverage your unique qualifications for the benefit of our client base.
That sounds like an excellent idea, Jennifer, Sarah replied. I'd be happy to discuss how my operational experience and strategic planning background can contribute to the company's growth objectives.
Perhaps we should also discuss how to create a work environment where all employees can contribute their best efforts without worrying about workplace harassment or professional sabotage. The message was clear. Sarah would be happy to discuss maximizing her contributions, but the conversation would also include addressing the systemic issues that had allowed her to be marginalized in the first place. Patterson watched this exchange with obvious pride, recognizing the tactical brilliance of Sarah's response. She had accepted the invitation to contribute more, while simultaneously establishing that any such contribution would come with expectations of professional respect and appropriate treatment.
Martinez, Patterson said, I can see why Morrison and the other contractors are so impressed with your approach. You're conducting business with the same strategic thinking and operational excellence that made you such an effective team leader. As the crowd began to disperse, Patterson lingered for a private conversation with Sarah. How does it feel? He asked quietly. Finally being able to stop hiding who you are? Sarah considered the question. Like coming home, sir. For 3 years I've been trying to fit into a world that didn't value what I had to offer. I thought I needed to become someone smaller, quieter, more conventional. But what I really needed was to find a way to be myself in a different environment. And now? Now I understand that my military experience isn't something I need to hide or apologize for.
It's something that makes me better at serving my clients and achieving results. The skills I learned in special operations strategic thinking, crisis management, attention to detail, commitment to mission success, these are exactly what people need from their financial advisor.
Patterson nodded approvingly. What's your next move? Sarah had been thinking about that question for weeks.
I'm going to build a practice that specializes in serving veterans, military families, and defense contractors.
There's a huge underserved market of people who understand the value of operational excellence and want to work with someone who shares their values.
And that sounds like a mission worth pursuing, Patterson said. And if you ever need references or connections in the defense community, you know where to find me. After Patterson left, Sarah returned to her desk to find a stack of business cards and contact information from colleagues who wanted to learn more about her background and discuss potential collaborations. The transformation from office pariah to respected colleague was complete, but Sarah realized that respect based on her military decorations was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, Sarah leveraged her newfound credibility to implement changes that went far beyond her own career advancement. She proposed and received approval for a veteran outreach program that would actively recruit military families and defense contractors as clients. She developed specialized financial planning packages designed for the unique needs of active duty service members and veterans transitioning to civilian careers.
Most importantly, she became a mentor for other employees who had been marginalized or overlooked, sharing the lessons she had learned about maintaining professional excellence while demanding appropriate respect. The Morrison account continued to grow, leading to referrals from other defense contractors who valued working with someone who understood their operational mindset.
Within 6 months, Sarah's client base had tripled, and her revenue generation had made her one of the top performers in the company. Marcus, meanwhile, struggled to adapt to the new dynamics.
His previous tactics of intimidation and marginalization were no longer effective, and he found himself isolated from the influence networks he had once relied upon. Several of his former allies began distancing themselves as they recognized which way the wind was blowing.
During a department meeting in late spring, Marcus made one final attempt to reassert his dominance, challenging one of Sarah's strategic recommendations in front of the senior staff. "I just think we need to be realistic about our target market," he said.
Sarah's approach works well for her specific demographic, but we shouldn't assume that military-style thinking applies to all our clients. Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled up a presentation on her laptop and projected it to the conference room screen. "Marcus raises an interesting point about demographic specificity," she said calmly. "So let me share some data about the broader applicability of what he calls military-style thinking." The presentation that followed was a comprehensive analysis of client satisfaction, retention rates, and revenue generation across all account types. The data showed that clients who worked with advisors trained in systematic planning, risk assessment, and outcome-focused strategies consistently reported higher satisfaction and achieved better financial results. "What we call military-style thinking is really just disciplined professional methodology," Sarah explained. "Thorough preparation, honest risk assessment, clear communication, and unwavering commitment to client success. These principles work regardless of the client's background because they're based on fundamental standards of professional excellence." She clicked to her final slide, which showed comparative performance metrics. "The question isn't whether systematic thinking applies to all our clients. The question is why we would ever choose to provide anything less than our best strategic thinking and operational excellence to any client who trusts us with their financial future." The presentation was devastating in its thoroughness and undeniable in its conclusions. Marcus had no response, and the rest of the room was nodding in agreement with Sarah's analysis. After the meeting, Robert Chen approached Sarah with a proposal that would change everything. "Sarah, I've been thinking about your success with the Veteran Outreach Program and your overall performance metrics," he began. "I'd like to offer you the position of Senior Strategic Advisor, with responsibility for developing new client acquisition strategies and mentoring our junior staff." The promotion was everything Sarah could have hoped for when she first joined Henderson Financial, but now it felt like a natural recognition of capabilities she had possessed all along. "I'm honored by the offer, Mr. Chen," she replied. "I accept with the understanding that this role will allow me to implement the kind of systematic, excellence-focused approach that I believe all our clients deserve." "Of course," Chen agreed. "Your methods have proven themselves. I want you to share that expertise with the entire department." As Sarah settled into her new role, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from marginalized target to respected leader. The military decorations and dramatic revelations had been important, but the real transformation had come from something much simpler: the decision to stop hiding who she was and start demanding the respect that her capabilities warranted. 6 months later, Henderson Financial's Veteran Outreach Program had become the company's fastest-growing division. Sarah's team was managing over $50 million in assets, and their client satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. Marcus Webb had quietly left the company, accepting a position with a smaller firm where his previous tactics might still be effective. His departure was barely noticed,
as his former colleagues had already moved on to focusing on the kind of professional excellence that Sarah had modeled. On a quiet Friday evening, as Sarah prepared to leave her corner office, the same space that Marcus had once occupied, she received an unexpected call from Colonel Patterson. "Martinez, I wanted to give you an update on something interesting," he said. "Remember those defense contractors I mentioned who were looking for financial planning services?" "Of course, sir." "Well, they've been talking to their colleagues, and word is spreading through the entire defense industry about Henderson Financial's veteran division. You've created something that's bigger than just a client acquisition strategy. You've built a model for how military professionalism can enhance civilian business practices." Sarah smiled, looking out at the city lights of Chicago. "Thank you, sir." But honestly, all I did was stop pretending to be someone I wasn't." "Sometimes that's the most revolutionary thing you can do," Patterson replied. "You've shown that excellence is excellence, regardless of whether it's demonstrated in a combat zone or a conference room." That's a lesson a lot of people need to learn. As Sarah hung up the phone and prepared to leave the office, she thought about the woman who had walked through these same halls 3 years earlier. Quiet, deferential, desperate to fit in. That woman had possessed all the same skills and capabilities that Sarah demonstrated today, but she had been afraid to show them. The difference wasn't in what Sarah could do, but in her willingness to do it without apology or camouflage. She had learned that true professional success didn't come from hiding her strengths to make others comfortable, but from applying those strengths with confidence and integrity. The mouse had not just roared, she had discovered that she had never been a mouse at all. She had always been a lion, and lions don't ask permission to be magnificent.